Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the simple and AI-powered rewards and recognition platform for employee engagement.
Diversity and inclusion efforts have gained significant momentum in recent years, and organizations are increasingly recognizing the importance of creating some inclusive environments. However, there is a big danger lurking. This danger is the tendency to tokenize individuals or groups, reducing diversity to mere appearances rather than embracing its true value. Hi listeners, in this episode of the Vantage Influencers Podcast, we explore the pitfalls of tokenism and its impact on employees and organizations, and discuss some practical strategies to ensure that diversity initiatives go beyond symbolic gestures. For the same, I'm your host, Susmita, and I welcome Amrita Pandey to join me today. Amrita is the HR business partner and lead DE&I at Colgate Global Business Services. Welcome to the show, Amrita.
Thanks, Susmita.
Welcome to Vantage Influencers Podcast. Thank you for joining us today in this episode, Amrita. So before we dive into our topic, could you please introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit more about your background and what you are currently working on?
Thanks for the question, Susmita. So basically, I am born and brought up in a place called Patna, which happens to be the capital of the state, Bihar. I finished most of my education up till 12th standard from Patna itself. And thereafter, I moved to Chennai to pursue my engineering. Whereafter I worked briefly for a period of 2 years in Tata Consultancy Services. And thereafter, I pursued my MBA in the field of human resources. And thereafter, I joined an organization called Hero MotoCorp, which it happens to be one of the world's largest two-wheeler manufacturer. That was in Delhi. And after Hero MotoCorp, I joined Colgate Global Business Services, which happens to be my current organization as well.
Right.
And I am currently donning the profile of an HR business partner. If I have to talk about my HR career so far, I started my career in the field of talent acquisition, which also had, semblance of employer branding. I've done project management. And but most of my HR trajectory has been revolving around the HR business partnering space.
Right.
So apart from this, if I talk about a couple of quick highlights in my HR career.
Sure.
So in the space of employer branding, I once had the opportunity of lead a national level project for Hero MotoCorp, which was for internship in partnership with MTV and LinkedIn, which the project was called MTV LinkedIn Get a Job, and it was an intern hiring show which MTV used to air. It was back in 2017.
Okay.
So that's mostly about my career. I thoroughly enjoy my HR business partnering piece, and recently I have been given the profile of diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Right.
which I'm quite passionate about because I feel that if it's done in the right way, I think it can take an organization leaps and bounds ahead. Not just in terms of building up the cultural fabric, but also in terms of the contribution in terms of the top line of the organization.
Right.
How maybe possibly we can explore it further in our podcast.
Yes. That is why we are talking about a very important topic on DEI today, that is tokenism and how we can avoid it. So first of all, fantastic experiences and qualifications, Amrita, with your wealth of experiences, and we are excited to have you here to share your insights on avoiding tokenism in diversity initiatives. So let's start with the basics, right?
Okay.
Let's begin by discussing diversity, equity, and inclusion in general. Like, can you talk about why DEI initiatives are so important in today's workplaces and how they can benefit both employees as well as the organization?
Okay. Okay, so like you said, Susmita, let's touch the basics so that our listeners are able to understand what exactly are we talking about. So basically, if we have to break up diversity, equity, and inclusion, then diversity basically refers to wide and varying range of groups within a community or a population. We can think about ethnicity, religion, ability, sexual orientation, and there are innumerable dimensions of diversity. Inclusion, on the other hand, is an active engagement of all members of that community or population.
Sure.
And equity is the treatment part of it, meaning a fair and just treatment of these members who are from a diverse background of ethnicity, religion, ability, sexual orientation, and whatnot, and giving them a fair and equitable treatment regardless of whatever their identity is. So these are three separate pieces which sort of, when they are lumped together, they become a very, very strong lever of the cultural culture building of an organization. Now, in terms of now let's address the question which you posed at me, that why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, right, in a workplace. Yeah. So if I have to talk about the importance part of it, I can give you, zillion reasons for it. But, we are in a business-centered world, right? And when we talk about business, the net question that comes to everyone's head is, what about the top line, right? So let me break it up to you. So Gartner recently had concluded a survey wherein it found that about 75% of the companies who have their frontline decision-making teams who are diverse and inclusive in nature, they exceed their financial targets as compared to the organizations or companies which are not. Okay. Now, they also, if we have to break it down, then possibly, a gender diverse and inclusive teams, they outperform the gender homogeneous and less inclusive teams by on an average of 50%. So that's a great number. Your top line. Your that's your financial performance. Now, it's not me saying it, but Gartner has surveyed about hundreds of companies, and that's a survey telling you.
Right.
Now, let's break it up. Why does it happen? Right. So basically, inclusivity fosters a sense of belongingness for employees. And, it creates a safe space for people to voice their opinion. They have a seat at the table. And, in turn, it breeds innovation. So a strong, diverse, equitable, and inclusive strategy is something that any company that wants to foster innovation would want to have. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this inclusion can also improve business decision making. Now, why? When everyone, regardless of their background, regardless of the ethnicity, color, origin, sexual orientation, when they feel that they are in a safe space and they have a seat at the table, they're more likely to speak up openly, share their perspectives. And it gives a platform to people to voice their ideas on a variety of topics, from new products to new markets, and hence newer and innovative ideas for the organization to solve a business problem. Are you getting where I'm coming from?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Right.
Right. So these are the financial metrics that possibly organizations can look at. Now, coming to the non-financial metrics, there was a recent study which was concluded, and it was found that 70% of the job seekers today, they consider diversity a factor in evaluating a prospective employer. Now, when I say this, we are at a juncture when there is an advent of Gen Z job seekers, right? So this number, if I look at from a Gen Z standpoint, this number even goes higher, because they typically happens to be, the new age generation, very open to ideas, very open, they are the pragmatic ones and the more accepting ones.
Yeah, right.
So if an organization is forward looking and, is trying to future proof itself, let me put it that way, then they have no other way to go but DE&I. Right? So that will be my take on this piece.
So it basically, DEI, it prioritizes, it creates environments where individuals can thrive and contribute their unique perspectives and make a positive impact overall, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So great points forwarded, Amrita. So now if we shift our focus to the specific issue of tokenism in diversity initiatives, can you explain to our audience like what tokenism is and why it's crucial to address it in the context of, diversity initiatives?
Okay. So tokenism, the word itself is quite self-explanatory, right? That you do something to just keep up with the appearances. It's just a token. It's not ingrained or it's not a part of your culture. It's not assimilated within, but it's a token. It's like a sort of a perfunctory change that you do just to keep up with the appearances, or you decorate your organizational profile in such a way that you seem like an organization which is diverse, equitable, and inclusive in nature. But the reality is far from it. Right? So basically, you're not practicing or living, breathing, exhaling, inhaling DE&I every day, but you're just doing it so that you are perceived in the marketplace as an organization which is DE&I oriented. And two, it also sort of helps you keep up with the appearances so that you for the lack of a better word, in bunny coat, school, right? Because that's what everybody is doing today. So I think this is a very, very major pitfall that organizations can sort of fall into. And if not cautiously, if not steps are taken cautiously to walk away from tokenism, there is a but obvious chance that you will fall a prey to this. Okay, it's just a symbolic effort to hire a small number of people from underrepresented groups to appear as if there is an equality within the workplace. But there is a huge difference between being diverse in your hiring efforts and seeming diverse in your hiring efforts. Appearing diverse to prevent criticism leads to tokenism, right? And frustrated employees feeling like they were only hired to check a diversity box.
Yeah, right.
So that is what is tokenism.
So it's kind of artificial or superficial, if you want to say, like symbolic effort to promote a diversity without being genuinely caring about the systematic issues or the opportunities for underrepresented groups.
Absolutely, Susmita. You've just hit the right chord.
Great explanation. So, how can organizations be sure that they are not engaging in this, process, in this tokenism, and instead they create a more meaningful opportunities maybe for these groups? Like, what are the steps that they can take to achieve this?
Okay, sure. So basically, number one that possibly an organization can do, they must assess the landscape, right? Number one is that, you look internally at your organization and see that, where are you placed in terms of your DE&I vantage point. Maybe you've just started, you're in the middle, or, you've just really matured as a champion, DE&I champion. So you really need to have a good understanding of your landscape. That's your beginning point. Number two, if at all, there is a clear underrepresentation of minorities in your organization with regards to leadership position, then typically what organizations do, they go ahead and hire people from the minority groups or underrepresented groups or marginal groups for that matter, and they put them up in executive positions. So one is that you put them in a leadership position just for tokenism perspective.
Right.
The other bit is, and which is the more important bit, that you place them in executive position and you give them the power and the influence that comes along with that position. So if you're doing that, then you're doing it right. Right? Also, Susmita, it's very funny, but if you look around and, organizations which sort of call themselves the DE&I champions, and, there is a lot of, tom-tom about them being the front runners in terms of DE&I. It typically so happens that the person who is from a, diverse background or from an LGBTQIA plus community happens to lead the DE&I space. Right. So typically, token employees are often made the spokesperson for the underrepresented group that they belong to. It's important to recognize that diverse employees are the first and foremost individuals. While we can and should encourage employees to voice their opinions and beliefs on certain subjects, the lived experience of that one employee will not be reflective of that entire group as a whole. Right. So as an organization, we must ensure that we listen carefully to any feedback or insight that this employee has and avoid expressing any negative, positive stereotypes which is attached to an employee's minority group. Right?
Yeah.
And also, you were saying something?
No, please continue.
Yeah. And also, it's very important to know, Susmita, that diversity is all hands-on deck effort. Right. Sure, it's great to create a team dedicated to diversity and inclusion efforts. But then, realizing that there is a problem is step one, which I also called out earlier as well. Right. Everybody in the organization needs to be on board if you want your D&I strategy to be successful. And especially, I'm talking about the leadership team. You need to have a buy-in from them. If at all, it's if you're doing it from a tokenism perspective that, it's a good to have sort of a scenario, it's better not to do anything. If you feel that from a cultural standpoint, your organization is not ready, let's park it and let's revisit it sometime in future when you think your organization is mature enough to handle that. And last but not the least, one of the worst things that one can do is to display imagery of yourself as a diverse team on your website or a social media platform. But when the actual makeup of your organization doesn't reflect that, it's okay to acknowledge that your team is not diverse and that you're working on it. So transparency about your D&I efforts go a long way.
Current position. Yeah.
Correct. And if you do this, if an organization indulges in this, there are multiple repercussions which are negatively going to impact the employee experience of that very organization. So these are a couple of things that probably, if an organization takes cognizance of, then they would not fall into a rut of, creating a negative employee experience for these underrepresented or, diverse groups.
Yeah. Also, I think, Amrita, for the organizations who are working on this diversity and inclusion thing, I think it's important to, have some mention about it in the policies and the practice and the procedures as a whole, right?
Absolutely.
Because without mentioning it in our policies, I don't think we can incorporate a diversity lens into the organization.
Absolutely. Then it will just remain a tokenism that we earlier spoke of.
Yeah. So are there any example of any specific HR policy or practice that can be adjusted or implemented to promote genuine diversity and inclusion that you can talk about?
So typically I'll just talk about from an marketplace perspective in terms of what organizations today are doing. So let me start off with a very livid example, a very example that possibly you also can relate to. So we give maternity breaks to our women employees, right? What about a scenario when a man is the primary caregiver? What if the baby is to be taken care of by the man? This is a possibility, right, Susmita? Now let me also come to another scenario that same gender partners have adopted a baby. What about them? If they want to, take time away from work, where does your inclusion come into question when you have a scenario like this? Now, what about a scenario when, let's say, you have washrooms in your organization? We always go with, gender tags, right? Men, women, when it comes to the washrooms, right? But what about our homes? We have gender neutral washrooms at our homes. Then why do we change it at the workplace? What's the need? We don't have a man-woman tag in our washrooms, right? When we are at home. So I think somewhere, let's not be hypocrites here. Right. There is a lot of banter about, feminism. I'm a, strong feminist myself, but I really don't like this thing that, that to sort of fortify feminism, we always say that, men don't do this, men don't do that, but we give them an avenue. What if a man wants to take care of the baby who's born? We don't even talk about such things today. It's a maternity leave, so let's call it a maternity leave. I think somewhere, our discussion, our conversations need to change.
True.
You don't call it a maternity leave. You call it a primary caregiver leave. You make it gender neutral. right?
So very important. Yeah.
Yeah, these are simple, quick wins that you can have in the organization, and they have a huge impact. Let me start off by saying that. So when we are having gender neutral washrooms in our homes, what's the need of having a gender tag washroom at our workplace? Again, these are very high impact quick wins that any organization can have.
Yeah.
In terms of our policies, then we can include, we have medical coverage in our organization. Most of the organizations have medical coverage. So why include only, you can include your wife or you can include your spouse? Why can't you say that, your medical facilities will cover your partner? Not necessarily everybody is going to get married, right? So I think these are the simple steps that probably, from an HR standpoint will make a huge, huge difference in the society of tomorrow and in the society of today. Because, this thing has come in a big way. And I think it's time we all sit up, listen and think in a very inclusive way. It can't happen by just one person, doing a lot of,
True. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. There has to be a total, I think, a trend maybe about all this.
Everybody has to accept it or sort of, anchor it and rewire their brain accordingly. It can start with one person, but then it has to be, at a universal level. Let me leave it at that.
The simple things, right, that we have discussed just now. But when it comes about the implementation, there will be hardly, few top companies, if you talk about like that, will step up for making these changes in their HR policies, maybe.
Sure, I think, but then let's be a little nicer to people now. I think many organizations have started, putting their leg in the door. So I think the changes, the ripples have already started. It'll take some time for it to mature or, bloom, if we have to call it. But then changes have really started trickling in. So let's see how it tapers up.
That's a great news. Hopefully, in the coming years, we see a big difference in our workplaces.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So quickly, can you talk about the long-term benefits that organizations can have if we see these changes happening in the workplaces, like to be specific, like avoiding tokenism and fostering genuine diversity and inclusion?
So I think number one would be that, you will create a safe space for everybody in the organization, right? And when you have an organization wherein every opinion is valued, people are not scared to speak up their mind, or they are, imbibing the values of being courageous. I think number one win is that, that you have a higher retention of employees. Nobody wants to leave a good organization, right? Even if it's for money. People would want to, be in a good organization, a healthy culture, a thriving culture where they feel that, they can be their authentic selves. So I think that's a number one win. Your churn, your turnover will go down, and, eventually the cost it hits for the bottom line of any organization when there is a lot of attrition and people are leaving. I think you can protect your bottom line from the very perspective. Number two would be in terms of, creating a competitive business advantage. So let me give you an anecdote. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but Abraham Lincoln, he had a very diverse cabinet. In fact, his diverse cabinet comprised of, his arch enemies. And his cabinet is considered to be one of the most successful cabinets in the entire presidency history of United States of America.
Okay.
And the very reason of it was that, it comprised of people who had diverse opinions, diverse voices. So it was not there was not an echo effect that people had really homogeneous views. If one person said one thing, so it was a yes man sort of an effort, that was a yes man sort of a scenario which was going on. But instead, there was a lot of debate, discussion, opinions being shared. And, when that happens, you sort of create a business advantage for yourself. Because you are discussing, debating a lot of opinions, counter opinions, and you're finally funneling down to something that makes sense for yourself. Right? Then research has also shown that organizations with very diverse teams are 33% more likely to outperform their rivals in profitability. So I think somewhere number two would be that it helps you with a lever of giving you a delta in terms of your competitive business advantage. The number three could be in terms of, let's say, company culture, right? So workplace culture is a sum total of values, beliefs, behaviors that contribute in organization's unique social and psychological environment. So when you have an organization wherein, you have people from underrepresented groups, so of different sexual orientation, different gender, racial, subs, then ethnicity. So possibly you start feeling that it's a safe space to be in. And, when you ensure equity of these diverse groups, everyone has a complete access to the same opportunities, right? Regardless of the background or circumstance. And maintaining an inclusive environment allows everyone to feel comfortable sharing their ideas and bringing their authentic selves. So basically, a lack of difference, which can lead to an echo chamber, where everyone simply agrees with one another without considering others' viewpoints, it's completely disregarded. So I think these are a couple of benefits that, if you have a diverse, equitable, inclusive workplace, will come into the foray.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this information, Amrita. Those are definitely very compelling outcomes that we can see, the long-term benefits of organizations who successfully, avoid tokenism. So we have reached the end of this conversation today. Your expertise and perspectives have undoubtedly, resonated with me and our audience. So we'd like to provide our listeners with the opportunity to reach out to you for further inquiries or any other discussions if they want to. So would you please tell us how they can reach out to you?
Absolutely. So Susmita, I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So I would request the listeners to reach out to me on my LinkedIn profile. You can try searching for Amrita Pandey.
Sure. I'll link to the profile in the show notes.
Yeah. That'll be great. So I think that's one way of how they can connect with me. And I typically answer in a day or two.
Okay.
So apologies if my turnaround is not, within 24 hours, but I try to respond to as many messages that come my way.
Sure. So before we conclude today, Amrita, I would like to take a moment to express my sincere appreciation to you. Thank you for sharing your expertise and insights on avoiding tokenism and diversity initiatives. It has been an enlightening discussion, Amrita. We look forward to possibly collaborating with you again in the future.
Thank you so much, Susmita. I actually had a lot of fun myself because I think we were talking about a space wherein I'm really, really passionate about. So I would look forward to any such opportunities myself. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you. Thank you once again. Yeah, regards.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks for listening to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.